We're going to take a look at some of the tools available for visualizing your scene in real time directly within the viewports. We will discuss pre-visualization in 3ds Max as it relates to the nitrous in-viewport rendering options and how they can be used to provide an effective real-time workflow. Make sure 3ds Max is open. Click on the Application button in the upper left corner. Click Open in the drop-down menu. Navigate to the Chapter 2 directory inside the Scenes folder. Remember, we set up our project directory. Now whenever we load a scene file, it will take us into the Scenes directory of the Understanding 3D Project folder. In the Chapter 2 directory, you can see that we have a file here named Chapter 2 previs01.max. Double-click that file to open it, or select the file and click the Open button in the lower right-hand side of the dialog to open it. You can see that the file opens with a single viewport set to hidden line. Viewport rendering in 3ds Max is handled by the Nitrous display driver. Let's take a look at some of the visual options the Nitrous viewport rendering system provides. In the upper left corner of the camera viewport is the Viewport Shading Options menu. Left-click on the Hidden Line option to open the Nitrous Viewport Shading menu. This menu is broken down into several groups. The option you would choose depends on what style you would like to use for the viewport rendering. The current style is set to Hidden Line. Let's say you're giving a presentation and you want to change the style to something non-photorealistic. There are several non-photorealistic options you can choose from. These are located under the Stylize menu option. With the Viewport Shading menu open, click the Stylized option. Click it, and from the flyout, click on the Pastel option. This will change the viewport to use a pastel viewport rendering style. Place your cursor on the time slider in the lower part of the interface just below the viewport. Then click and drag the slider to the right. This will advance the frames, showing the animation of our camera, using a non-photorealistic style. Take a few moments to experiment with some of the other stylized viewport rendering options. There may be other times where you want to view your model in a more realistic fashion. Click on the Viewport Shading menu. Choose the Realistic Rendering method. You'll notice that the viewport is now shaded more accurately. However, we want to adjust the lighting and shadows and some ambient occlusion to add to the look of the viewport. Again, click on the Viewport Shading menu, then click on the Lighting and Shadows option, and from the Lighting and Shadows flyout, click on Illuminate with Scene Lights. Immediately, you'll notice the change in the lighting that now reflects the location of the sunlight within our scene. To turn on the shadows, again, open the Viewport Shading menu, select Lighting and Shadows, then click Shadows from the flyout. In the viewport, you'll see shadows appear from the light source, in this case, a daylight system. Now let's turn on the Ambient Occlusion option to get additional shading between objects in the scene. Open the Viewport Shading menu, select Lighting and Shadows, then click Ambient Occlusion from the flyout. You'll see the viewport refresh, and there will be an additional level of subtle shading between objects in the scene. Now that we have our realistic viewport set up, click on the time slider and drag the slider back and forth to see the scene as it would look through the animated camera. One thing to take note of as you drag the time slider, the viewport progressively refines the shading of the scene when the camera stops moving. Using these Nitrous viewport settings gives us the ability to pre-visualize our scene using a variety of viewport rendering styles. You can use any of these styles depending on your presentation needs.